Hello and welcome back to Where Are All My Friends? God, I cannot sing. I think I'm tone deaf. Hello and welcome back to Where Are All My Friends? What an interesting, cool episode this week. It was with Cavaliere of the Wonder Years, which is my undisputed favorite pop punk band. There, I said it. I think they're the best. This was cool though, because we had a really candid conversation. All in, he shared such an interesting perspective. I got to ask him a lot of questions of the points in the band that I was the most interested in, and he shared such cool answers. We talked about the financial point, the tipping point where it was like, oh, this is real. We talked about their first sold out show. We talked about looking at it like a business and pacing it and budgeting. We talked about how they creatively work with each other and like their recording process and how he views the evolution of their music. Just so many really interesting things. It was such a fun conversation. So I hope you like it. If you are a fan of the band like I am, I absolutely think you will. And if you do, I say it every time, but hit your boy with a little subscribe. Whether you're watching or listening, that goes a long way, and I appreciate it more than anything. If you know another Wonder Years fan, or if you know another fan of people talking about things that they're passionate about in podcasts and you want to send them this episode, I won't be upset. I certainly wouldn't be upset. I'd say, hey, listener, viewer, thanks. I appreciate that. And that's what it would be. It'd be me thanking you. Be like, hey, bud, thanks for letting me do what I love doing. That's pretty cool. So there's me. That's just me explaining that. I'm done now. I need to end this intro. So there you go. Enjoy the episode. Cavaliere, the Wonder Years. This is cool. This is really, really cool. Just a second ago, I was saying, and I will unapologetically say it, the Wonder Years is my absolute favorite pop punk band. I think that you guys do something so, so special. And I will throw that big, giant statement out there and I will stand by it. So it's a real honor to do this one with you.
Wow. It's a big, huge statement. I'll duck and cover because I don't know if I can catch that. But that's really kind of you. And it's so nice to be here. I was saying likewise that I've been really enjoying hearing about what you've been doing and, loving the podcast, and honestly, how much fun it is to listen to you enjoy doing what you do and chatting it up with everybody that you have on. I think that's really something special and probably why so many people like it. So dude, I'm happy to be an official part of it now. Very cool.
Just a couple folks gassing each other up, but that's awesome. And I don't want to, we could probably do that for a second, but let's get right into it. And where I wanted to start is super, super briefly, just explain who you are, the band you play in, all of that. And then I want to get into a little bit of that. I have a specific spot I want to get into.
Absolutely. Yeah. I do play in a band called The Wonder Years, a pop punk band from Philadelphia. I've been doing that for a bit of time now. We put out a couple records and it's been treating us well. Andrew and I met actually, we were just trying to remember, and got to know each other on Warped Tour a few years ago.
Yeah, 2013.
Boy, how time does fly.
I know. It's fucked up.
So I play guitar for that band. I obviously grew up outside of Philadelphia, and just like the rest of the band, most of us met in high school, and, really just a classic local scene story for you. It wasn't something that we were taking too seriously at the start. For anybody that is familiar with our deep, deep catalog, they'll know that, it started to grow legs and started to get into something where we wanted to do something that was a little bit more fulfilling. And that kind of started to transition into us doing this for a living, which is pretty remarkable in these times to look back and see how far we've come. And in between all that, when we're not touring, much like right now in the last year, much like everybody is not doing right now, started doing some stuff on the side. We can maybe get into that a little bit later, but
yeah, absolutely.
I've started working out of a new space a couple years ago that's actually just across the bridge here in New Jersey with a couple really talented friends. It's just a nice little home to put songs together, demos, work with other bands, and try to make something that we enjoy.
It's cool to see a creative branch off. It's like it's an extension of kind of what you were already doing, but it's also a cool evolution. And I like that. I want to talk specifically about a spot with the Wonder Years because, like I was saying, like I really do view you guys on the highest plane and tier of the genre. And I think that you're pretty open and pretty humble about the fact that you guys weren't out here. Like you didn't take it all too seriously in the beginning. And it kind of was this natural evolution. You guys all grew. But I want to explain my perspective and like my view of it. And then maybe you can kind of answer some questions and paint the pictures and fill me in as the outside looking in. For me, I grew up skateboarding, mostly into cars and skateboarding. And then probably around 18, like really started getting into music, started touring with my friends, blah, blah, blah. I was living in Florida and there was a music scene coming together. And pop punk was certainly a part of it, but it wasn't like, it was all these different genres happening all at once. And talking to some of the guys from A Day to Remember, talking to Tim from Under Oath, like there were all these different genres that I guess you could maybe like in the biggest umbrella call rock. Like they all had guitar, but like you had hardcore, you had pop punk, you had like synth pop, rock, whatever. You had all these different things happening. And I think this is also kind of like the pinnacle of Warped Tour, bringing it all together so well. But I didn't necessarily like view myself as a pop punk kid. And that was a very real archetype that you could be. So I had one friend, shout out to Danielle, and I told her one day, I was just like, yo, like, make me a CD of all your favorite pop punk. Like, I want to know. And she burns me this CD and it's got a bunch of stuff in it. And heavily in that is the Wonder Years. And I was like, what the fuck is this? It just like, it was that moment where it clicked and I got it. I was like, oh, this is different. And I want to say that was probably a lot of stuff off of the Upsides, that album. And it really stood out to me. And that it was kind of just that. Like, I didn't really think too much past that. I was kind of just like, oh, okay, cool. Like, this is great. I like listening to it. And I didn't really like, you couldn't really like lurk Instagram the same way. Like, I didn't really have a concept of like, how big is this band? It was just like, this sounds great. Fast forward a little bit, I start touring more and more with my friends. And the name, The Wonder Years, is a big household name. And you really held that down. Fast forward again to where we were saying where we met, 2013. You guys were on Warped Tour at the same time we were. And like seeing your guys' crowds, I was like, oh my God. And the energy that it had live and everything. And then where I will so strongly just be like, this is my favorite pop punk band and this is the best pop punk band, is my opinion says the music is the best. However, my opinion also says the people are the best. I became really close with Matt. And he was so incredible. I would always see you guys around. You were so damn kind. You took such good care of your fans. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. I want to make this episode more than just the Wonder Years. But what I want to hear from you firsthand is your interpretation of the moments of like that mainstream, massively like accepted and popping off, and how you guys grew with that and how I think you did it for the right reasons. I'm getting a little bit wordy. So I guess now from your side, take me to the experiences of you're starting to put music out, call it around Upside Suburbia. In my opinion, you're starting to have that success. What's that look like to you? What are the conversations you guys are having? What's that feel like?
Yeah. Wow. Great question. So, a couple of things in there that you mentioned.
Sure. Yeah. Go back if you need to.
I think is awesome. One, friend burning you a CD. The true origin story of any for so many people. The burn CD mixtape, and honored to be on it. Also, shout out Danielle wherever she is. I guess I can thank her for being here now. So that's awesome. So that was probably, if that was like Upsides or maybe even like a little like pre-Upsides, it makes me think of one thing when you talk about, like I like the songs, but I have no concept of like how big the band is, if anybody knows, if it's just like a random, thing. And it makes me think back. I was having a conversation the other day about some of the parallels between like when we were coming up, it was this like MySpace pure volume era, was like one of the main platforms, especially for independent bands. You can just start a band, have a website, go on and find 8 of your friends or whatever it was, you know what I mean? And kind of start that like networking thing. And I think that's at the heart of a lot of how we became us, because a lot of it was, very DIY in that regard. It was, it was Dan, our singer, booking shows with another friend, whether it's local, and then kind of getting on there or some other message boards and going back and forth and trying to be like, hey, can we, we'll put you on this show next month. Can we grab a slot on this upcoming thing? Yada, yada, yada.
That's just how it worked.
It really was. And it's so funny when I think about that specifically in MySpace, you were like, how big is this band? And it was this weird era of like, yeah, I remember like finding a bunch of those bands too, some of whom like are now like lifelong friends and were actually incredible bands and definitely probably deserve to be far and away much bigger than they ever got in some cases. But then there were definitely other like bands where there was this strange illusion of like, this band has 1 million plays, like they must be huge, like they must be an arena band. And then you like cross paths like a year later and you're like, this band's playing for like 100 people. And that's not to say that 100 people isn't like a huge milestone in a band's career, but it was this weird thing where it's like, the numbers that I'm seeing and everything, like someone's doing a really good job on making you think, this band is such a hit and resonating with so many people. Whereas for us, I think the moments that we kind of started like realizing that something was happening were all like in-person moments. You know what I mean? They were all like playing shows or opening for somebody, and you're like, oh man, like half the crowd like knows the word, you know what I mean? And I mean, even just starting from like the VFW halls where it's like everybody, 6 people know the words, but like 3 of them are friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, that's so cool. And I think that's like that first small infantile like transition into realizing then you start to not know the fit. Then your friends are, your friends are still there. But then it's like they're with like 30 other people and you're like, well, now I don't know a good, like the majority of these people. And then that transitions to something real. And you see that, just real, honest, like genuine, like they don't know you. There's nothing in it for them. They just found the songs, maybe through MySpace, maybe not, whatever. And started listening to them on their own for enjoyment and got, them and showed up. And that pull was great enough to bring them out to see what it was all about live and see, see if they wanted to kind of pursue that relationship with that band. I feel like that's kind of the general trend. So,
So when did you start seeing sellouts? When did you start like packing more than basements, and like what like album cycle or what era, like where was that starting to be like, oh shit, I don't know any of these people and they're all singing the words?
Yeah. I mean, so the upsize release shows we did, we actually did like 5 release shows, one in Philly, one in Boston, Detroit. So those 5 shows were the ones that like sold out, but sold out in other cities. And of course, like we had been to those cities before, but specifically this place I don't think has shows anymore outside Detroit called Modern Exchange. That was the first time that we were like, wait, what do you mean like the shows sold out? I'm sure the promoter probably let more people in or what, you know what I mean? But like that was the first time that we were like, why aren't you letting people in? Like, whatever. It's like, dude, it like the capacity is whatever. And we were like, that was the thing that we were like, not even at that point really thinking of. We were like, hoping that people came out. We knew, a couple people had,
the idea of too many people being there is absolutely foreign. You're like, no, we're from Philly and we're in Detroit. So anybody that came to see us, you let them on in. This is crazy.
Right. It was all VFW halls, church basements and things like that, sure, they have like legal capacities, but if it's somebody that's renting it out and you're putting on the show, like it's not a thing where like some other people.
And that was such a magical time too, right? Like that is an era of that golden era of an absolutely jam-packed VFW hall and like a good pop punk show. Like that's actual magic. I don't know how you can explain that. I don't know what that energy is. Just those hot, sweaty, shitty shows, and everybody knows every word and moshing, and people are surfing over each other. And it's like that energy was something so, so special. And I think it will always be there. Like obviously right now there's no live shows, but I you see it. But I just like I have to like go back and just give that the largest pat on the back for being like, thanks for being a magical time.
No, it's so good. Just like coming out of there truly just drenched and feeling like you just came out of like the best battle in the world, you know?
Yeah, you went to war and you won with your friends.
Everybody wins. Yeah. No, I mean, some of those shows like just insanely hot, but in the same way, it's just like, it's almost, the energy obviously like probably from directly correlates with like the actual temperature, or if it's just a spot and it's in the summer and the AC can only go so far, or it freezes up or breaks, like plenty of those shows where you just have to be like, no, seriously, like you have to open the door. So yeah.
So that was Upside's era. You had your first like proper sold out shows. That was crazy. And another interesting thing there is Upsides comes out, 2010? Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, you guys technically had been a band for about like 5 years?
Yeah. I mean, so like I was telling you before, so we started in a very, very lighthearted way as just kind of like a boredom project, just like wrote a joke song, right? After high school, we had all played together in different bands in town, and some played different shows. Soup Dan and Matt had been in another band previous to that had done a little bit of touring, and yeah, it was more just like hey, we found this all like uniform, like we all love this genre and what's happening, with like Motion City, and obviously a lot of the throwback, like the OG pop punk bands, and we were like, well, that would be fun, like a fun project. That would be fun to do. So we messed around, did that, assumed it would kind of just, nothing would come of it. End up doing the like, hey, can we like hop on and just play this one joke song in the middle of this set, show kind of thing. And then I think we put out like a split with another band, and assumed we would just go to college and that would, whatever. But we still had fun with it. So we still started like, like having opportunities to, if we all kind of went to school locally within like a 2-hour radius. I went to Drexel in Philly. A few of the guys went to Temple and spots, and Millersville, and Michael went to Bloomsburg. But so we'd come home and we'd do like a Friday night show, Saturday night show, because we wanted to come back and like see our friends anyway. And that kind of started this like weekend warrior, like, all right, we can do Friday, Saturday, Sunday shows, or okay, well, this semester I don't have any classes Friday, or I can skip this, whatever. And so we've kind of been doing that slowly, and like occasionally like writing and kind of growing, and eventually put out a 7-inch, and the songs on that kind of started gaining a little bit more eyes, I guess.
I guess my only point to that was just, it's crazy that even though it was for fun, and even though it was so natural, and it was just you guys being genuinely stoked about a genre, wanting to make some music, wanting to see your friends, doing stuff on the weekends, it's still just cool that like really it was about 5 years, call it, before having like some crazy sellout moment. Like I think it's easy. Something that I come back to a lot on this podcast is it's really easy to think that things happen overnight, and they don't.
No.
So like just the idea that like you guys, even though it wasn't like a grind of like one day we're going to make it, and it was more just an authentic, like, let's have fun. That's still crazy that it took that amount of time to get to that spot. And then my other question, now kind of fast forwarding from the Upsides, is that's your first sellout. What was the first moment where you're like, holy shit, like I probably don't have to work a job. Like I'm getting paid enough where like this could be a career moment. Like where does that hit you? Where you're like, oh, what?
Yeah. You know what? So what's strange about that is it's, I mean, so you mentioned like, back like 2013, like the first time we did Warp Tour. I still remember like getting the call and getting the offer for that. Um, I don't know, we were like in Texas in a parking lot, I think. And and like having that realization where it's like you kind of have all these like nostalgic emotions that flood back with, we grew up going to Warp Tour, and that's where, we found a lot of our favorite bands, or even if we hadn't seen some of our favorite bands at Warp Tour, they were very heavily involved in that scene and in that group.
Yeah.
So I think it was a weird thing where it's like, wait, uh, like we're now in that like position, even, you know what I mean? And yeah, I mean, for any band doing it, to get a Warp Tour offer back then, it was no surprise that everybody that was like managers, agents, it's like that is usually a good thing if you're a band like us that feels at home in that world with a lot of the other bands that are going to be on the tour, and feel like that's where your brand and where the energy of the band is nationally.
It was the place to be. Like, it was just like in the early 10s, like in the late, like 2000, call it like probably 2008, or actually a little earlier, like mid 2000s to early 10s. Like, if you were any type of band in the genre, Warped Tour was the place to be. It was the pinnacle. It was fucking amazing.
Right.
So it's like extremely validating. And it was, it was a place where you knew there was so many built-in people that if you wanted to go and sell CDs to people all day long, like merch sales, guarantee, built-in guarantees, free catering, like it also represented steady income in a weird way. So I don't want to steal your answer to your question, but is it that around that 2013 Warped Tour is when it started to be that?
Andrew, I mean, and so that was kind of, maybe the first in like a very large sense. Before then we'd done tours, sold merch, like, things have been fine. Like we were able to like pay our bills and kind of get by and come home, but still like coming home was like a somewhat nomadic thing too, and that was definitely the tour where things started getting really exciting very quickly. Just based on the overwhelming, I think I remember it's like, you do a merch order and you like try to project what, based on, previous touring and stuff, but there's nothing like Warp Tour. And this is a thing where it's like, obviously we were lucky enough to have people around us from a business capacity that had been on the tour before, maybe knew a little bit better what to expect. And I remember thinking some of those like merch estimates, I was like, there's no way, like, this is, like whatever, from like,
You're like, I'm sorry, what?
well,
No.
but
you don't have to.
it's not, don't.
But I'm going to ask it. I'm going to ask the most direct one. Best Warped Tour merch day.
Oh man. Honestly, I don't remember it exactly. I just know that it was up until that point. And again, for anybody listening, this is in no way like the the say all and be all of what you take home. And I know it's,
there's so much more. There's the cost of goods. Right. There's what you're paying your management, all that.
And that's a whole other podcast in and of itself, I think. But I mean, I think I still, when you start hitting like double digits in merch, or more so, I think for me, when like it wasn't even necessarily the money, it was just the actual numbers, looking at a spreadsheet and being like, wait, how many people bought like this shirt?
Yeah. You're saying double digits, like over 10K in a day?
Yeah. So that was, and I mean, and again, stuff like that, Warped Tour too, anybody that's been on it will tell you, every day is not built the same in terms of crowds.
Correct.
Like it based on the band and where you are in the country and the timing of stuff. But yeah, I mean, that was like I remember having a couple moments where it was like, wait a second, like we're like this is like we might come home with like job money, like
yes. Yeah. That's what I was looking for. That's what I wanted to know.
that was probably, one of the first times where it was like seeing that and seeing it come together. And then not only that, but, doing signings, like we paired off, I think like with Nintendo. So we were there every day getting to do
Oh, yeah.
I think that was like, what did they have out? Was it the Switch or was it? No, it was before this. I don't know. I'm not a gamer. That's a Nick Steinborn.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably that. It was probably that Warped, man, where it was like saw things on like a different level, where some of the not predictions, but like some of the the targets that either our manager or some other people that had gone through it and had ascended and started to kind of to grow into and through that space were like, yeah, no, it's crazy. Like if you record that's kind of hitting and growing while you're on that tour. And I mean, I know, a bunch of people have told me anecdotes and stories about bands that start a tour playing to no one and end the tour like on main stage closing to like thousands of people, because like hits. And I'm sure Kevin has a ton of stories like that. But yeah.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting thing to talk about, like, because it's so funny. Like, here we are just like kind of chopping it up as homies, but that's when I met y'all. Like, that was like, oh, this is that band that Danielle burned me the CD. Like, oh, they're cool as fuck. And like, oh, wow, they rip live. Like, that was really my first in-person interaction. And what's so funny about hearing it now from you is, to me, I had already been done assumed that you guys were fucking massive. Like, just off of like the music itself, the outside perception. I remember at the time our band was sponsored by Glamour Kills and you guys were sponsored by Glamour Kills, but you guys were like fucking sponsored by Glamour Kills. Like, it was like another level. So when I saw y'all on Warped 13, you like, anybody could be like, yo, this band is fucking killing it. But what I didn't realize was that was new to y'all. That was like pretty new territory for you guys to be like, oh shit, we're killing it. Like, oh, we are on main stage. There are massive crowds. We're selling real amounts of merch. We're making real money. Like, I didn't realize from the outside that was really the beginning of it feeling legitimate to y'all, because I had already assumed that it was like big. And another thing super quick. Another thing to touch on is like, we talk about like merch numbers. And I think it could say like a band at that level, it would be really easy to make $500,000 on the tour all in, like 500K between every merch day, between guarantees, between signings, all of that. However, you hear that and you're like, God damn, let's go. But that goes away so fast. And that was another thing that I think is really interesting about breaking down that perception of that time is nowadays the scope of music is a little bit different. A lot of kids are able to make music on their own. They're able to upload it to Spotify. They're getting direct streaming. They're not going through a label, where, at least from my perception, correct me if I'm wrong, I actually want to hear your perception, but take a hypothetical 500K. You have, first off, you have to pay insurance because you're on a big festival. So that cuts out some amount. But then you have your booking agent, which takes 10%. You have your manager, which takes 15 to 20%. So already 50K gone, booking agent. And these are super rough numbers, and booking agents wouldn't get cuts of merch. But like, I'm just kind of like shittily doing this math in real time. But then you have like manager, call it 20K because that's easier math for me to do. Cool, 100K gone. So then you're down to 350K. And then there's all the other bullshit. There's your bus that you have to pay for. There's blah, 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 blah. So I don't know, take another 50K off that. And that's probably being short. So like, even if you then take 300K and then you split that with, I don't know, a typical band has like what, 5 members, something like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're talking 6, but then also like you're paying crew, you're paying a bus driver, you're paying.
Oh fuck yeah, crew. So
the bus itself on a day rate expensive if you have to take one because of production or XYZ.
Yeah, the bus is easy 1,000 a day.
You don't
without fuel.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were back and forth, and every tour we still crunch the numbers, and it's not like, because that was the biggest thing where I think a lot of people don't understand. It's like there's a bus, but like that is a serious fiscal responsibility, and sometimes it just doesn't make sense. But there are bands that get to a point and they're like, I won't ever do anything not in a bus. And then there's bands where they're just like, well, then you're not going to be able to tour right now because numbers are down, and
right. And you guys have not had that pride. You guys have gone back. You guys have done buses, you've done bandwagons, you've done vans. And that's sick.
It depends on the tour. It depends on the routing. It depends on where it is. It depends on, where we are on the bill. It's like we try to be smart about that. And I think that's because we came up the way we did, where it was just, like a lot of the other like OG punk and hardcore bands in a van trying to figure out, get to the next show. How can we stretch this little bit of merch money? And how can how can we try to come home with a little bit, this time kind of thing.
Totally. And to conclude my point on that Warped Tour example, so it's like you all those splits, and then I don't know, say that every band member then walks away with $30K. Dope. That's awesome. And maybe it's more, maybe it's less, whatever, but tens of thousands, and you're like, holy shit. But then the other interesting thing to think about is Warped Tour only happened once a year.
Mm-hmm.
And bands that were on it were on an every other year cycle most of the time. So then it's all of a sudden, when you look at what you consider to be a big band, or when Andrew from 2013 looks at y'all and I'm like, they're the biggest band ever. The interesting thing to think about is it's you kind of have the career of an athlete or something, where, yes, you're getting large sums of money, but then how long does that need to last for? Because you can't tour every city every day. You have to take breaks. There's only one Warped Tour. So it's you have this big chunk, but then you need to spread that out. And then you need to reinvest in your band, and your business. So it's just really interesting. I guess I'm kind of riffing out loud with you and thinking about it in real time, but it's it's crazy to hear that was your first moment of success, and breaking down just really what goes into that. And yeah.
Right, dude. So there was a lot in there, and it's all real. And I'm glad you're putting it out there for people that are curious, or if there's other people, in bands, or, trying to figure out their business model right now, or get it off the ground, or maintain it. But it's all real. And I think that doesn't get spoken about a lot, because a lot of people don't want to talk about money if they're making it, or for a number of reasons. But I think also what you start to see, I love actually the athlete analogy with Warped Tour. It's pretty funny. It's like signing a big deal, but also something could happen and you could not be able to tour for another year and a half. I don't know, a pandemic.
Ever heard of it?
Yeah, what's that? So I think that's really solid to know that I think sometimes people have the perception that, oh my God, this band's in a bust. They're selling tons of merch. I think a lot of people would be surprised with the relation of going back to what we were talking about at the top of this, how big they think a band is, what big means, and what that kind of boils down to in real world terms. And we've always tried to be, and this is another thing that I think somebody out there, I'm sure somebody does it, but we certainly kind of had to learn this on our own, and we got lucky. But I know plenty of case studies that didn't, because they didn't have somebody to help them manage their money, or figure out how to be hey, you just had this huge windfall. You're 18, but you should figure out how to stretch that across X amount of time, because you won't get another tour payout until the back half of this cycle, 12, 16, 18 months from now, because of how you're structuring your, you know what I mean? And actually have those talks. We had to all kind of do it. And I still, to this day, it's have to budget out. And it's almost, there's not a lot of, businesses do this and do long-term planning, but we've gotten to the point where for years now, every year, a rotating calendar, start looking a year, even 2 years out of what, we think we might want to do, how it can all line up, and just to make it as seamless as possible, but also as a business to make sure that we can keep doing it, and keep doing it well, and keep doing it where it doesn't start to strain, the creativity. So we're always able to give our best. And
oh, super weird. It muted.
Well, and now all we have to do is just casually gloss over the fact that you're wearing different headphones, and it'll be seamless.
I know, exactly. So I'll just be like, "Hey man, yeah, that's so crazy. Thanks for taking that break where I wanted to switch my headphones.
Yeah, for comfort. Yeah,
Appreciate that."
yeah,
For comfort. I would never nothing ever goes wrong with recording a podcast, and it was totally not a hardware malfunction. It was just me being like, "Dude, this conversation's so good that I need to have these hi-fi headphones on.
my
An AirPod won't cut it."
ears deserve the isolation. Yeah, yeah. So if we're carrying on, I think the one thing I'll just finish up. We were talking about that moment and realizing like the business end of it and everything. And I think what's crazy, a lot of bands and artists, especially like in the pop world, come into a lot of money if they have success early on, very young. Yeah, and so I think for us, we had to learn how to like manage that money. You come off Warped Tour and you're like, okay, but like this isn't just like go buy like 6 jet skis and party, right?
Yeah.
That runs out real quick. So we were lucky enough that we were diligent and all like really always treated the band, kind of responsibly to like not just like not buy a ton of gear that we really didn't need super early on, and really look at if it was like reasonable and kind of balance all those business decisions and judgments, and say it's like, will buying this like shiny new thing like really help us, or make more money to buy more shiny things, or
Yeah.
or do we
Well,
just
and
keep that,
that segues to the other part of the band that I did want to talk about was just like there's something that I really respect about you guys because I call it in my head like this sense of DIY in the right way, but you've never been like super flashy or like we're so cool or we're this big giant headlining band and we should be perceived as this. It's like even throughout all of the success, because like again, we were able to be on Warped 15 together. And, like I kind of watched that growth. It never got to y'all. It never was like this thing of like, oh, we're so fucking cool now. It was always just these dudes that were happy to be there making music that they liked. And I think you maintained all the DIY elements that matter while still growing. And that's something that I really, really respect. And it's an example that I think is a great one to be set because with the athlete like salary and pay structure and knowing that it's these big chunks every now and then, I think you guys did a really good job of staying humble and being aware of that and just doing what you did so well. So that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, well, it's definitely not always easy. We were talking about this before, and first of all, I don't think we had enough abs to get collectively to get a big ego or a big head or get flashy with it. There's not enough to show off in that department, so we had to kind of like rest on like merit and trying to make something of substance, right? That we believed in it, and hope that shines through, which has formed all of us, but also individually the way I work and try to view music through that lens of really making something that has lasting value and lasting power, and if it's honest and something that you as a musician or as a creator get behind, then even if you're going to be your own worst critic 10 years down the line and turn around and be like, that's awful. It's like, if you in that moment had enough, passion and devotion behind it to let it go out into the world and see what it brings back and see what it, attaches to and attracts, then that's a good thing that you can't go wrong, trusting yourself in that way. So I think we tried to let that be our guide. And it's really cool to hear you say that. And hear all of the impacts, and stories that people have of how it's affected their life in a positive way. So
Yeah, you set a great example of like integrity. Like you set like a very good do it for the right reasons, authenticity, integrity type example. And I just think that's cool. Another thing I'm curious of is how has that applied now as a more of like a producer? Like, so the band has continued to succeed. You've evolved. You've written music that on a fan level, like again, from my outside perception, I think it's really cool how you guys have evolved. And it always feels it's like, cool, call it pop punk, but like it's more than that. And you've continuously pushed that and put out really cool music. But I'm curious now, because I do want to talk a little bit specifically about you. Something that you have been getting into a lot is a producer. So how is all the lessons, how has everything that you have learned from the Wonder Years as a whole come back to you and what you're doing now?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, a lot of ways. So if you talk about the writing process in general, so spent the majority of my adult life in a space in a creative collaboration with five other guys. Luckily, they're my friends, and we still get along, and we still enjoy doing it on our better days. But that's not to say that there aren't creative back and forths and differences of opinion. Everybody has their own taste, right? So I think that's been probably one of the top lessons that has informed how I treat being in the studio and working with other people's music, right? Remembering that it's not your vision that is the only right way, and especially with music or any creative like art-based endeavor, there's never just one right way to do something, and then a lot of the views uh, are highly subjective, right? When it comes to who's creating it, what they're trying to do, and how it's interpreted by an audience. So I think that alone has helped me, learn some lessons in patience, and also learn some lessons in the value of listening, right? And I mean that literally in the sense of like what other musicians are doing, or and trying to pick up. I think like uh, jazz is a perfect example of this medium where like the highest caliber players in real time will hear somebody else throw a little lick or rhythm in, and then like 4 beats later they'll kind of ghost note it. Some of the most incredible drummers, like I can watch that for hours because it's just, you see it so rapidly, like it's not even a thought, it's actually like it's like passing over that portion of like have a thought and then tell your body to do it. It's just almost emotively connected. It's pretty cool. So in that way I think listening as well, as being patient and trying to understand what somebody else might be seeing from their vantage point, because everybody's coming to the table with a whole unique set of tastes, right? And influences. I think that's from a Wonder Years standpoint, that's what probably makes us so strong and gives us such, I would hope, a unique identity that has continued to evolve, is because we all have very specific opinions. There's a lot of overlapping things, but when we get an idea whittled down, all six of us in a room, and we can all like feel it, and just you stop playing that idea on loop, and then immediately you don't have to say anything. You kind of just know that's it. We got it. It works.
Yeah. You know what's crazy? What I'm hearing as you say that, like, because I'm not a musician, I cannot play music. Like, I love music, but I cannot play. But the way that you explain that to me is I hear that you're explaining communication. And when I say communication, I'm not saying talking. Like, somebody can talk at you, somebody can say a bunch of shit and not listen. But when you're truly communicating, you're speaking the same language and you're exchanging an idea. You're putting something out, and somebody is immediately in turn sending something back in real time, dependent on what you're saying. So you're talking about jazz, you're talking about that. Music becomes communication, and it's them understanding what the other person is saying and then instantly saying something back. So hearing you, like, that's kind of how I'm hearing you explain that, where you guys as a band got really good at communicating and not talking over each other.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't always smooth, and we still, it still gets passionate, and people still, have opinions. That doesn't change. That'll never change. Right.
Sure.
But I also don't want it to change. And I think that's it's nice that I kind of have that realization of bringing that to work with other strangers, or effectively what you're establishing, and kind of one of the paramount things that I try to really not take for granted is the factor of trust, because you're communicating with someone and you're hoping that they in turn trust you enough to communicate back with you. Probably something that if we're talking about music, is pretty darn personal a lot of time,
Yeah.
So for me, I don't take that lightly, and I try to establish that line of communication. And there's a lot of ways to communicate. It's obviously nonverbal, but even just back and forth, especially now we're in this like virtual era where, the world has gotten a lot smaller, and there's different techniques and different ways of speaking, right? Sometimes, if I'm working remotely with a band, we'll do something as simple as send Logic demos back and forth, right? And I can communicate by just picking up a guitar and laying a line over it, and sending it back. And they can immediately just be like, oh, that's what he was talking about. But I didn't have to like sit there and try to describe a melody line or describe a guitar part or this and the same thing goes for arrangement stuff. I mean, technology now, if you get just like an introductory handle on it, you can just slice and dice, chop and screw, and immediately I can be like, great, I love the bones of the song. I have two ideas. Here they are. And you can immediately have like a real time, mock-up of everything, right? Whereas I think long ago you'd kind of have to go down and draw it all out and sketch it all out, and either notate it if someone's like really concrete into like reading charts down, or get everybody on the same page about how the idea is going to work, and then play it together. And there's a nice component too, because then you get some happy accidents in that, I found too. So that's also part of it, which I think is a really important thing that I've learned about my perspective with the band that I try to bring to the production world and the studio world of like capturing, because being the player, we were talking a little bit before we started this about that, like the moment you hit record, sometimes you lock up and all of a sudden like, this really nice, flow and vibe just goes out the window. And a guy that has something completely rehearsed and nailed down just can't play it for some reason. And it's this weird mental trap. The same thing kind of goes for learning, like not to try to control things too much. Or I admittedly, I definitely started out my life as a perfectionist. I remember I was a kid where it's like whether it was like a school project that definitely didn't fucking matter at all. Or just like trying to play something or trying to like, record early demos or whatever. It used to like bother me. It's like, it's not perfect. Like I gotta do it again. I gotta do it again. And I mean, this is something that being in the band and with 6 other guys you have, or 5 other guys, you have this really, really great source of feedback that it is this like kind of like blanket of trust where even if you're unsure about something, if 5 other guys of your best friend, that are best friends with you, you all share so much in common already and do this on a consistent basis and it's this really great thing where it's this it's kind of this like funnel that I can be like, hey, if I run an idea through here, here's like the catalyst for a song. I don't know. And everybody unanimously is either yay or nay. And you get that kind of like instant feedback and instant energy where someone's like, oh my God, what is it? I want to, I want to play it. Or you can kind of on the other end see this like hesitation where you're like, yeah, it's kind of cool to be like, okay, we're not going for kind of cool. We're going for like, something that's, you don't even have to say how you feel about it. It's just, let's get to work. What is it? Show me the part or play it again. I want to try something over it. And I think, so it's finding those moments too, and not being, it kind of goes back to not having this like singular vision. Has to be the way it is and allowing things to kind of creatively float where they will. And I think that's what our band has started to kind of do and allow ourselves to evolve and talk about how we have, what opportunities we have to evolve. But man, I mean, that's why I love just everyday learning. And I think some of, we've been lucky enough to work with some really talented producers and engineers. Steve Evans has done a bunch of our records. We work with Joe Ciccarelli, who's a legend, and has worked with a ton of huge name like pop and rock artist over the years and has just like a wall of Grammys at this point. And he'll still tell you he's not done learning. He knows a lot.
Yeah.
He knows a lot more than most people. But I think the smartest people, and this is what I try to take away from it, is the smartest people know that they're never done learning. And they find each day and are ready, even if it's a kid. They might see something differently than someone that's been in the producer chair trying to like put things into this formula for decades and decades. And it you might miss a fresh perspective or that happy accident. You know what I mean? Joe, I'll kind of end on this because I love this, and this kind of set the tone for us doing Sister Cities with Joe as well. And that I kind of always try to embrace at its core, in terms of like a philosophy, not being so defined by the rules or by how the right way to do something is. I think that's also been how our band has kind of sailed through things and making our own way and saying, well, even when people don't care or don't want to sign us or don't want to put us on a show, we're going to go book our own show. We're going to go do, whatever it is that we can do outside of that to keep things going because we love it. And Joe will tell a story. So when he was real young, starting out his career, he actually got a call to an engineer wasn't there to come in and work with Frank Zappa. And when he was real green, so obviously he the way he tells it, he was like nervous. But the point of it is that Zappa, just kind of this like mad creative genius, comes in, and some of the first things and some of the things that Joe even remembers to this day were just like, he pulls it up like it probably like a guitar track or a vocal track or whatever it is, like kind of like, and Zappa's listening. He's like, it just sounds too nice. It just sounds too clean. He's like, turn the gain all the way up, and eventually like forces him, like tells him to like kind of crank it to where it's like the channel's farting out and you're getting all this distortion. It's kind of like blowing up and on the edge. He's like, yeah, no, there's something there. That's it. It's like you get the rule break, and so much of like modern production and studio sound and the things that people hear, not only in records like ours and from bands like us, but across the spectrum of like pop and electronic and every genre, are people pushing those boundaries and breaking the rules and finding out how to do it, and finding out what they and trusting their gut about something, not saying it's good because they did it the right way or the way it's been done before, but finding a new combination of things.
That's really cool. Like that's so much of what I also love. Like, again, I'm not a musician, but I think that's something that a theme that I've always come back to is understand the rules, learn the rules, because that's important. Then know why you're breaking them. Break every freaking rule you want. So it's just like, have the fundamentals, understand what the rules are and why they're there, and then change the world by breaking them. And I think that's sick that that's something that you have carried through. It feels like not only in the Wonder Years, but what you're trying to do with your own production and helping others now record as well, which is so, so cool.
No, absolutely. And that's the kind of stuff where it's not easy at first, because when you're younger, maybe you're heavily relying on your influences, and maybe there's a bit of imitation there. Your first band starts out covering the Blink and Green Day songs and all that. So then a lot of the stuff you write tends to gravitate towards, well, that's it's all. But the older you get, the more things you're exposed to, the more things inform each one of those like micro decisions that all make up the sum. They become more valuable, and that's why finding all of those new unique parts. And I've recently actually started getting into kind of doing one-on-one session stuff, because what I realize is, working with especially independent artists or some local bands, they know enough to be like, I know I want this and this. So they come in, they have a vision for a song, put a song together, put an EP together, put an album together. But then a lot of them will like turn around and be like, hey, what do you think the best strategy for this is? Or the project doesn't end in the studio anymore. Like I said, going back to, it's like, in this day and age, I think there's a ton of opportunity, and with technology, and anybody can just like learn how to make a song and put up some profiles for free online and just get it going immediately. But but there's a lot of other steps there that are lost, and a lot of things that, a lot of cracks to be filled in the forefront that I think bands that came like kind of before that era, and even in a different era where streaming wasn't as much of a priority, did it a little bit more organically with like touring and in-person stuff, which obviously you can't do now. But I think that's where it's like I started trying to just at least give whatever sound advice and be like a good, soundboard for them as I could, because we were lucky enough to have some really great sources of that early on in our career and as kids. And so now, I've dedicated some time like that too these days to do some like one-on-one stuff with people that have questions, or definitely out and willing to take the time and make the sacrifices to do the hard work and put the time in, even though that might look a little different than what putting the time in did for us back then. There's there's more parallels than not. So if I can be even just some source of like taking the like 15, 20 years we've been around it and doing it and mistakes, then I'm happy to kind of do that and at least try to like pay it forward in that regard. And hope, hope that it reaches somebody
that's really cool. And I mean, dude, like that's exactly what you did on this podcast. Like, it's cool that was a big piece of me wanting to do this podcast, is like, I love conversations like this. I love helping people one-on-one, but at a point you're just like, damn, like how, like I can't even scale that, right? Like I want to help more and more and more. So being able to distribute knowledge on a podcast or any platform where you're able to do more was something that I got really excited about. So for this episode, I mean, dude, I loved this. Like you shared so much and it was so insightful. I think that my takeaway of all this, it was just such a candid, honest conversation of where things are at and like everything that's been through. And I think that people can learn a lot just by hearing conversations like that. So thank you so much for sharing everything you did.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I mean, you're so right. And I know I, in fact, as a great example, learn a lot from podcasts like yours. And I thoroughly enjoy it. I mean, the medium itself is, I think that's why so many people are gravitating towards it, because there's a lot of really sound resources and a lot of, especially in the creative space, a lot of people that have a lot of experience, a lot of wisdom, and a lot of time to share. And I love learning from that. I can't.
Yeah. There aren't enough, comes back to that thing you said, always be learning.
There aren't enough hours in the day, honestly, to like, listen to all of the podcast episodes that I have queued up and still get work done. So
yeah, it's hard.
It feels great. But at some point, you got to go do the work and put it in.
Go apply yourself. Yeah. Don't just become obsessed with learning and not applying.
But,
so if anybody listened to this and they really did like what you had to say and got so much out of it, or maybe have further questions, where can everybody find you if they want to hit you up, if they want to work with you, if they just got a question, whatever?
Yeah. My Instagram is case_rock. I check that a lot usually. And as well as the studio profile, which is True Level Studio. You can either visit that website or my website, which is just Cavaliere.com, or band stuff, thewonderyearsband.com. Obviously, we have some things planned in line to roll out over this year and are always moving forward with something. Yeah, I mean, if anybody's interested or has any other questions, obviously, I'd be happy to chat and love helping and paying it forward, man. So I appreciate you having me on.
That's sick, man. You really shared a lot of value on this one, and you're the exact type of person that I get so hyped to have on the podcast. So it was an honor, and I thank you so deeply.
Cool. Thank you.